talking about passage number 1. Okay. Now, this passage is all about multinational corporation and early chartered companies. It's a nice comparison as it has been depicted by the author through the particular passage. To a many student, actually, I have come to know that it seems really difficult. But my dear friends, it's not difficult at all, because if you go through the entire passage step by step, definitely it should come to your mind that this passage is quite easy, because it's a nice blending of elements, certain bit of elements regarding earlier chartered companies and modern multinational corporations. So, author has clearly or rather explicitly mentioned all the attributes of different kind of corporations and companies, and comparison is explicit over here. So, going through the first paragraph, if you go through it, definitely you will come to know that yes, it is talking about multinational corporations and how it has evolved. And author mainly talked about the earlier chartered companies regarding the certain kind of elements. Okay. Now, going through the paragraph 2, if you go through paragraph 2, you will come to know that yes, early trading companies successfully purchased. All the attributes of early trading companies have been mentioned over here, and author has tried to elaborate it through lots of examples like Hudson-based companies and Native Americans trade and day-to-day operations and oversaw the post workers and servants. Everything has been written over here quite clearly. And the last paragraph, the early trading companies did differ strikingly from modern multinationals in many aspects, right? They depended heavily on the national governments of their home countries and thus characteristically acted abroad to promote national interests. It's talking about mainly the management section, that there was certain kind of large volume of transactions over there. So that's why in the early trading companies, it was quite complex. It was quite difficult to go through all the transactions, to go through all the activities. It required the top level management to get involved in that particular section. So more or less, if I talk about the first passage, the difficulty level, yeah, a bit difficult it is, I must say that. But if you have good reading habit and if you have good perception, it's more or less a management kind of topic, and it has been taken from GMAT section. That's a wonderful collection of reading comprehension passages. These passages you should practice so that different kind of genre you could explore, right? So that was all about the passage what I have already talked to you. Now let us move to question number 1. Here, if I find the question number 1 that is written over here, the author's main point is that. So here we are going to discuss what is the actual what is actually the author's main point. This kind of question invariably comes in the CLAT examination. You should be ready for that, because if we are talking about the main point or main purpose or the objective of the passage in any way or any mode, it may appear like. So if I go through the option, first option, it is clearly saying that modern multinationals originated in the 16th and 17th centuries with the establishment of chartered trading companies. Now, it is definitely mentioned in the paragraph, but it is not the main point. B, the success of early chartered companies, trading companies like that of modern multinationals depended primarily on their ability to carry out complex operations. So, my dear students, if you go through option B, you will come to know that it is talking about the success of early chartered trading companies. My question is to all of you that do you really think that the passage is talking about, or rather author's intention is to say about the success story of early trading companies? Is there any kind of contribution regarding elements that have been mentioned in the passage, that what contributed to the success or success related any kind of issue? No, not at all. So in that way you can easily eliminate option B. Now moving to option C, it is already been highlighted by me for your convenience that it is going to be the correct answer. Early chartered trading companies should be more seriously considered by scholars studying the origin of modern multinationals. It has become almost the habit of the students that you may be confused with this particular word like scholars, because to many students, basically they are thinking that scholars word actually not mentioned in the passage. So why should I select it? Look, my dear friend, if the author has continuously talked about that early trading companies need to be explored, there might have been research work regarding early trading companies. But what do you expect, that your neighbor or your any members of your family, they are getting involved in obscure niche of history, or you can expect them to deal with this kind of obscure topics? No, not at all. It is the function, or it is the duty, or it is the responsibility of the scholars, as we think, that they have to discover, they have to explore, they have to go in detail or in depth about this particular topic. That's why here the word scholarly has already been mentioned over here. Now, if you are trying to find it out in the passage, you will not find it out, but actually you have to go through the crux, you have to deduce the inference. So it is the function of merely the scholars, it's scholars function to get involved in the in-depth study. An early chartered trading company should be more seriously considered by scholars is exactly studying the origin of modern multinationals. So they need to take care of what is the actual origin and what are the attributes regarding modern multinationals, and this work is quietly scholars are responsible for that research work. Now, moving to option D, scholars are quite mistaken concerning the origin of modern multinationals. At any point of time, the author, no point of time rather, I could say that author has not talked about, that is, they are quite mistaken. What do you mean by quite mistaken? Have they committed any kind of error? No, not at all. It was the function of the scholars to get involved in in-depth study. The author actually wanted to mean that if they could have concentrated a little bit more in that particular thing, research work regarding early trading companies, in that case it would have been better analysis, but it doesn't mean that they are quite mistaken. That's why option D will be eliminated. So finally we are coming up with the option C, and that is absolutely going to be the correct answer. Okay, so I am just tick it out. I have already ticked it out. Early chartered trading companies should be more seriously considered by scholars studying the origin of modern multinationals, right? Let us move to question number 2. Here, with which of the following generalizations regarding management structures would the author of the passage most probably agree? Students, this kind of questions are quite common in the CLAT examination. You should be ready for that to tackle, right? So if I go through the options, hierarchical management structures are the most efficient management structures possible in a modern context. Actually, the author has not focused on the structure or the management processes. Rather, he has focused on the early trading companies and the modern multinationals companies. From that particular perspective, the concept of management comes, or rather discussed, right? So option A is absolutely invalid. It doesn't have any connection with that. Now moving to option B. Firms that routinely have a high volume of business transaction find it necessary to adopt hierarchical management structures. So I have already mentioned within the bracket the particular sentence from which you can get the clue or the hint. Increase in the volume of transaction in such firms are commonly believed to have necessitated this structural change. If you go through the first paragraph, you have to find out this particular line. And if you find this particular line, definitely look, I am just underlining this particular line, and that is commonly necessitated, believed to be necessary to this structural change, right? So this, from this particular line, you can easily get to know that what has been asked and what should be your correct answer. It is talking about that in the earlier, it happened that volume of transaction in such firms are commonly believed to have necessity. For example, if the volume of transaction is much more than it has been already expected, then definitely you require adept management. So that is being talked over here. Now question is that with which of the following generalizations regarding management structure would the author be of the passage most probably agree? So definitely this has been explicitly mentioned in this particular passage. The firms that routinely have a high volume of business transactions find it necessary to adopt hierarchical management structures, and that is required over here. Now, first, from the first paragraph, it is quite explicit. So, B is strong answer. Now, option C, hierarchical management structures cannot be successfully implemented without modern communications and transportations. It is not the crux of the passage and it is not to be highlighted, in fact. So, option C will be eliminated. Now, moving to option D. Modern multinational firms with a relatively small volume of business transaction usually do not have hierarchically organized management structure. It is vague. It doesn't have any connection from the perspective of this particular passage. So we are coming up with the strongest answer, and that is option B for sure. And from first para, you can get the hint. Moving to question number 3. According to the passage, early chartered trading companies are usually described as. Now, four options are given. If I go through option A, it is written irrelevant to a discussion of the origins of the modern multinational corporations. Number of times it has been described by the author in this particular passage that there was no relevance. There was no relevance of the earlier chartered companies regarding from the perspective of modern multinational corporations. Okay, though it has been mentioned two different kind of early chartered companies and modern multinational corporations have already been mentioned, but regarding relevance, no, it is absolutely irrelevant. The trading companies are irrelevant to this particular kind of discussion. It has been quite explicit from the passage, as you know that. Option B, interesting but ultimately too unusual to be good subjects for economic study. No, it is not. It cannot be the answer because it is talking about it is interesting, but it's not creating any kind of interest. But it is quite explicitly, it is citing, the author is trying to cite the example that yes, it is absolutely irrelevant to that particular discussion. C, analogous of 19th century British trading firms. It cannot be the answer, as you know that it doesn't have any connection with that. And last option, rudimentary and very clearly forms of the modern multinational corporations. That is also vague. So actually, what has been asked, you have to focus on this particular question. Early chartered trading companies are usually described as. More emphatic, it should be irrelevant to the discussion. So that's why we are going for option A, and that is the correct answer. I have already ticked out, right? Let us move to question number 4. It can be inferred from the passage that the author would characterize the activities engaged in by early chartered trading companies as being. So if you go through the entire passage, you will come to know that author has mentioned several kind of activities of the early chartered trading companies, and at that time it has already been mentioned that there was lots of transaction. So complex enough in scope, the first option as it is written, complex enough in scope to require a substantial amount of planning and coordination on the parts of the management. Yes, exactly. If we are talking about large volume of transaction, definitely you require some efficient kind of people to accomplish that task. So definitely it was complex because there was the absence of strong management. Adept management, and that has been highlighted in the passage as well. So option A is absolutely valid, no issue with that. But let us consider option B as well. B, too simple to be considered similar to those of a modern multinational corporations. No, author is actually arguing against this particular fact. So B is not going to be the correct answer. Option C, as intricate as those carried out by the largest multinational corporations today. There is no mention about largest multinationals today. So from that respect, it should be eliminated. Now D, often unprofitable due to slow communications and unreliable means of transportation. So no, it is absolutely vague. So finally, we are coming up with the correct answer that yes, it can be inferred from the passage that the author would characterize the activities engaged in by early chartered trading companies as being, it was actually complex enough because there was deficient, or you can say that lack of efficient management. Okay, so I am just taking it out, option A as the correct answer. The last question, and as I have already mentioned the where from you can get the reference, the author believes that complex activities of the early companies require a multi-level management structure to oversee them. From that particular line, it is quite clear that yes, A is going to be the correct answer because complex activities have already been mentioned, right? Moving to the last question of this particular passage, question number 5. The author lists the various activities of early chartered trading companies in order to what? The thing is that here it is written, analyze the various ways in which these activities contributed to change in management structure in such companies. No, it is not analysis of various ways by which the activities are contributed or responsible for the contribution to changes in management structure. Option B, it is written, demonstrate that the volume of business transaction of such companies exceeded that of earlier firms, right? So do you think that the author has demonstrated that the volume of business transaction of such companies exceeded that of earlier firms? Was there any kind of comparison there? No. Option C, refute the view that the volume of business undertaken by such companies was relatively low. Now, if you can get the reference over there, I have already mentioned, the author includes the list in order to attack the common assumption that the volume of business transaction was low. Actually, it has been already mentioned that the business of volume of business transaction was low, right? But to refute that, to reject that particular view, author has presented substantial amount of proof over there that the volume of business undertaken by such companies was relatively low. So it is the strong answer over here. Now option D, emphasize the international scope of these companies' operations. Okay, so do you think that author is emphasizing the international scope of these companies' operations? No, rather he is going to highlight that the volume of business transaction and about those kind of companies that were considered as relatively low. So we are coming up with the correct answer, that is option C. I have already ticked it out. So here we end the analysis of passage 1